Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to today's bonus upload. It is Saturday, so I am going to attempt to do a Saturday Nightmares live from New York at 12 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. If I cannot pull off a full live stream, which is somewhere between 2 to 3 hours, I will at least do max an hour. I will try to do a whole live, but I don't really know if I can. Hopefully, because I do have a lot of fun, and I know that you guys do as well. So before we get into this bonus, though, a couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help this channel to continue to grow and go, and yes, folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's bonus, shall we?
It is not just the corrupt governments that can screw with DNA and create Chimera and other abominations and creatures. Mother Nature does as well. And I stumbled upon a very interesting article, and well, it may just give us some answers to some things. Remains discovered of Neanderthal girl whose parents were two different species of human. The 90,000-year-old remains of a teenage girl is the first evidence of interbreeding between two different species of early human, scientists have just revealed. Remains discovered during an archaeological dig in Siberia have been confirmed as a hominin hybrid between Neanderthal and another sister species to Homo sapien, the Denisovians. The girl, known as Denisovia 11, was believed to be 13 years old when she died. Her remains were excavated from a cave in Siberia in 2012, among other Denisovian bones. Paleontologist Vivian Sloan, who made the discovery, initially believed she must have contaminated her sample, she told National Geographic. But after 6 separate tests, the find was confirmed. Ms. Sloan, whose team reported their findings in the journal Nature yesterday, said, "We knew from previous studies that Neanderthal and Denisovians must have occasionally had children together. But I never thought we would be so lucky as to actually find an offspring of the two groups. All evidence of Denisovians have come from the same Siberian cave where the hybrid girl was found in 2012. The girl's bone fragments were initially cast aside by archaeologists among a mass of other bones from the cave, including lion, bear, and hyena. It wasn't until Samantha Brown at the University of Oxford came to study them that she was found to be hominin, leading Miss Sloan to investigate. She added, "The finding of the first-generation Neanderthal Denisovian offspring among the small number of archaic specimen sequenced to date suggests that mixing between late Pleistocene hominin groups was common when they met." It is striking that we find this Neanderthal Denisovian child among the handful of ancient individuals whose genomes have been sequenced, added Svent Pabo, director of the Department of Evolutionary Genetics at the Leipzig Institute and lead author of the study. Neanderthal and Denisovians may not have had too many opportunities to meet, but when they did, they must have mated frequently. Much more so than we previously thought, Mr. Thiebaud said. Early woman. Homo neanderthalis are relatively recent human predecessors, ruling an area that covered Central Asia, Europe, and the south of England from around 100,000 to 40,000 BC, making them our closest relatives in the hominin family tree. They often had larger brains than Homo sapiens and were the first human species to make tools out of bone. It is believed that they were wiped out by the spread of Homo sapiens across the planet around 28,000 years ago, with only small pockets of the iconic caveman surviving and interbreeding with Homo sapiens. This accounts for around 1 to 2% of Neanderthal genes in the DNA of European people. This newly discovered girl actually had a Denisovian father, not a Homo sapien. The first Denisovian DNA was only discovered in 2010 at the Denisovia cave in Siberia, Altai Mountains, and the sister species is believed to be an offshoot from the archaic hominin of 1 million years ago. So, I know a lot of people are like, wow, that really doesn't have anything to do with Chimera. Well, it actually does, because usually two different species do not breed. It's thought to have happened during this period of time. They only thought it was to happen, but now they have evidence of it. Nature at its best. But another thing that really gets my brain just functioning is this is a sister species to Homo sapien. And we just found out about it in 2010. And yet, there are people that, if we told them in 2009, hey, there's a sister species of the Homo sapien and this, and that, they'd be like, no. Just like now, when we say, hey, there's actual proof of Bigfoot and Dogman and other stuff like this. Just scientists haven't found it yet. You know, I mean, this is an exciting find, because it only, for me, kind of makes it concrete that eventually we will have scientific proof of these creatures that we study and have become so fascinated with. Today's second part of the upload. This happened on August 1st, 2021, at roughly 2 a.m. My cousin and I were heading home from Montana and heading through the Black Hills. I had picked out a spot to camp in the NF and planned on just setting up camp in the back of my truck and sleeping. So I set a pin for what looked like a dead-end road to sleep at. We pull up to the main road and get to the spot probably 2 miles back. 43.7345 by 103.9461 558. And we notice that there's a logging operation going on. So I pull off to the side in case they're going to be working on a Saturday, and I shine my light around the perimeter and I don't see anything. So we're setting up our bed, and my cousin hears this bang that sounded like someone smacking a stick on the excavator beam, or whatever hard metal was out there. And so he looks at me and says, "Did you hear that?" And immediately after he said that, we heard a second bang and decided to get the hell out of there, so we packed up our shit and drove by the area where we heard the noise. So I pull up and open my window and shine the flashlight at the area, which is a hill, and I see 2 sets of eyes. The space between the eyes was probably 6 to 8 inches apart, and they were both clearly looking at my vehicle. One was about 6 feet off the ground, while the other was probably 4 feet taller than the other. So I reverse because they're moving around, and I yell out the window, "Hey, who's there?" and do not get a response. Ended up getting the hell out of there. Ended up concluding that it was probably standing on some sort of equipment, but I'm not sure what those eyes were. I'm going to talk to the rangers and locals tomorrow. Today's third part of the upload. My friend and I have never experienced something like this before in our entire lives. Recently, my mom had to go to a high school friend's birthday party. It was convenient for us to go because a family friend has a farmhouse we could stay at in Central Florida. My mom didn't feel comfortable going alone because the farmhouse can be really creepy at night due to the lack of light on the property, and it just being in the middle of nowhere. So I told my mom I would go with her as long as I could bring a friend. We get to the property, and it's a huge 52-acre plot of land with cows, horses, and open fields, with a tree line surrounding the land. We look on the map to see exactly where we were and saw we were right next to 2 Native American forests. We unpacked our stuff and we were able to check out all of the property because the owner had golf cart type of ATV. My friend saw a TikTok talking about Skinwalkers and their Native American name, and we didn't know any better, so we were talking about them all day on parts of the property. Later that night, we saw a video talking about how even saying their name could provoke them to come. We immediately got kind of scared because we found out that the party of my mom's was going to be an hour away, so we'd be at the farmhouse all night, alone. As the sun started to set, we quickly noticed that none of the windows on all 4 walls of the house had curtains. With the lights on in the house, you could only see a reflection from the inside, but could see right in from outside. As I said, the property had little to no light, but some floodlights were motion activated on the back porch of the farmhouse. Just a quick description of the farmhouse. It was a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom house with a little living room and a kitchen. There were 2 doors, one leading out to the fields in the back, and the other was directly attached to a horse stable, which was more of a lounging area, as there were tables and a bar with a giant flat screen. Okay, so now you can get into the scary part of the night. My friend was putting away our dinner in the fridge, and I was outside smoking. As soon as I walked back up to the table in the horse stable, I heard something very close to me and ran back inside. As soon as I came back inside, my friend asked if I knocked on the window. Of course, I had said no, but my friend found that hard to believe, as she definitely heard a distinct knocking at the window. This window is important to the story because the floodlights were right outside of it. I forgot to mention we had brought in our dog, and she was fine the entire day until it became dark outside. When my friend and I were both inside, we just brushed it off until the floodlight outside, the window turned on, and my dog bolted to see who was out there. My dog sat there and barked at the window, but when we went to check it out, there was nothing there. Both of us really needed a cigarette, so we both decided to go outside and give it one more try. My friend stepped outside and looked to her right. I was confused and told her we should stay in the stable, so we walked to the table. As soon as we sat down, there were another 2 knocks on the other side of the building. We got up and sprinted toward the house, where we locked ourselves in, and my friend told me she heard whispering coming from the right as soon as we stepped out of the house. At this point, we're really freaked out, and my dog had began to bark again at the same window where the light had turned on. Once again, there was nothing. The only comfort we could get at this time was calling my friend's parents and some of our friends. However, after a short 10 minutes of us talking to people, our service cut out, and both of our calls failed. We couldn't text anyone either, and this really scared us because we hadn't had a problem with our service the entire day. We once again tried to relax and put on a movie, but that's when we heard something jump onto the roof and walk above the room we were in. My friend and I immediately leapt up and ran to the bathroom. We didn't know what to do, but at this point, I thought my best bet was to run to the car, which was at least 40 feet away, and get off the property until my mom and the owner could make it back. We grabbed our stuff, still hearing whatever was on the roof, and walked around to where we moved in the house. As soon as we got to the door, my friend pushed me and said, "Listen," which is when we heard 2 knocks right at the door we were standing in front of. It then ran toward the back of the house where all of the floodlights on the back porch went on. The dog was going crazy, and my friend and I were on the verge of tears. I told her that we needed to run to the car and get the hell out of here, which we did. As we were running, we could hear something on the roof of the stables, almost as if it was following us to the car. We sped off and sat in the parking lot 2 miles away for 2 hours until my mom and her friend returned to the property. They escorted us back in, and as we were walking through the stables to get to the door of the house, there was another knocking in the stable. The owner said that she had heard it and went to go check but saw nothing. Something my friend and I had noticed was the sounds of the crickets were back again. When we left the house earlier that night, there was not a sound that could be heard other than whatever was on the roof. My mom ended up sleeping there at the house, but my friend and I were traumatized. We felt as though the farmhouse was peaceful again as soon as we got back, because we didn't feel any negative energy that we were feeling that earlier that night. We were also too scared to even sleep, so we both sat in the bathroom on the floor apologizing for whatever we might have offended. We honestly don't know what this could have been, but we don't want this to ever happen again to any of us. Today's final encounter. This takes place in a very small town called Elbert, Colorado. It's very far out in the middle of nowhere, like a grocery trip that took a 45-minute drive just to get there. I moved out there in the summer of 2013 when I was about 11. My family lived on an 8-acre piece of property in a fairly thick pine forest, with a house just outside of the very edge of it. The driveway to the house was super crappy, super long dirt road that led out to the main street. That had to be a little less than 1/8 of a mile away from the house. To this day, I think that this place was the most peaceful place that I had ever gone to. The only sounds that could be heard were those of nature and our chickens, as we could not hear the rare car that would pass by. The nights that were the best part of this place, though, because of the lack of city lights. I was able to see every detail of every night sky down to the dimmest star. Because of the darkness, however, you weren't able to see a single thing below the horizon of the night sky. Along with that, there were several packs of coyotes that lived out there, and every night they'd all howl together. With enough of them, the noise would almost sound like water. The only thing that really sucked about the property, however, was the walk that we had to make just to take the trash out. The garbage company would only accept the cans that were brought out to the main road. We'd normally take the trash out before it got dark, but occasionally I'd forget and would have to do it in the dark, which I normally didn't mind. The trip would normally be a super peaceful walk out there, and we had headlamps at the ready so that we could easily see where we were going in the dark. Well, the summer before I moved out, there was a night where I forgot to take the trash during the day, and the batteries on the headlamps died. This meant I had to try to navigate my way down the driveway, almost completely blind. I went outside and stood next to the trash cans for a minute or two, staring at the darkness, in order to hopefully adjust my eyes. Staring into the darkness, though, I felt like there was something off. The normal coyote sounds were gone, and for some reason my eyes just would not adjust to the dark. I kept staring into the abyss, looking for any signs that my eyes may adjust, but no luck. Then this terrible feeling tore through my chest. The best way I can describe it is that this darkness, this abyss that I was staring into, was staring back into me. I was frozen with fear. I knew that I was alone out there, but something told me that if I were to walk into the darkness, I would not be returning. I continued staring, almost unable to look away from the darkness for a long time before my mom came out to check on me. Her opening the door seemed to break me out of my trance, and I ran to her and cried. She looked at me, confused, and noticed that I still hadn't taken the trash out. After telling her about what I felt, she laughed a little and gave me some encouraging words, telling me that if there was anything out there, our dogs would surely have noticed by now. She then told me to come back in 10 minutes for ice cream. I turned back around and walked back to the trash can, shaking. I'd never been so scared in my life, and what of nothing? I chuckled to myself, realizing the absurdity of it. When I took my eyes back off the ground, the chuckle turned back into a cry. I realized that I wasn't scared of anything. I was terrified that there was something out there that I could not see, waiting for me to leave the light of the house lamp to attack. Then the coyotes started, and my eyes started to adjust. Whatever may have been out there was now gone, along with my fear. The tears stopped along with most of the fear, and I was able to start dragging the trash cans down. The walk was somewhat scary, though. I was able to let the sound of the coyotes distract me. By the time I got back to the house, I felt safe again, but I couldn't stop thinking about the abyss. While I lived at the house, that was probably my scariest encounter. There were other scary encounters while I was there, but the only one that could even slightly relate to the others takes place at my friend's house. For the sake of privacy, I'll simply refer to this friend as D. D had a property that was about 10 minutes from mine, and we shared the same forest, with the only separation being a road in between us. We'd been hanging out for a while that day, playing video games, when I had the great idea to go out in the dark and explore his property. We agreed and waited until nighttime fell. After a few hours of video games and dinner, it finally seemed to get dark enough out, so we went out. We were wandering his 7-acre property, being pretty stupid, loud, and making half-assed attempts to try to scare each other. After some time of this, we eventually wandered into a clearing, and I guess the attempts settled in for both of us. At the same time, we looked around. Concerned, there was something off, and it felt like we were being watched. Trying to keep a good mood and maybe to try to keep my mind off whatever was making us feel this way, I suggested we make a scary movie to scare Dee's little brother. Dee laughed and agreed, pulled out his phone and started recording. We were acting like we kept seeing things in the woods. I would throw a stick when the camera was facing away, make weird grunting noises and such in order to make this video creepy. We both were having a great time. However, deep down, I felt like something was very off, and I think he did as well. Then out of nowhere, a twig snapped behind us. I automatically assumed that Dee had thrown something, but when I looked at him to confirm, he was looking at me to see if I had thrown it. Before this moment, I was trying very hard to make my voice sound as scary as possible for the video. However, as soon as I heard this, I didn't need to try anymore. We stared in the direction that the twig snap came from for about a second, hoping to make out something. But to no avail. Once again, my eyes would not adjust to the darkness, except this time, instead of physically standing in the light, I was inside of the darkness, partially for the video and partially for my sanity. I whispered, "Run." Dee nodded slightly, his face illuminated by his phone. Then we started sprinting in the direction of his house. I don't think I had to run so hard in my life before, but there was a feeling in my gut still telling me that we weren't fast enough, and we needed to hide. Dee must have felt the same thing. He took the lead and led us to a nearby cat shed, A motion sensor light flickered on as we passed by, and we got in the shed as quickly as we could. After getting the door shut, Dee turned on his light, revealing the inside of the shed. At the time, it seemed to me like the cats were hiding from something. However, looking back on it, they were probably just sleeping in their beds that were in the corner. This freaked me out even more. Dee started climbing the wall of the shed to lead us onto almost a shelf-like structure that had a window so we could look out. Dee sat on one side of the window and I sat on the other so that we were facing each other and could see both angles of the window. Eventually, with the light on outside and the added comfort of a roof over our head, we started to calm down and focus on the video again. As we were talking about what might have been out there, the motion sensor light turned off, dropping the outside back into the darkness. We went quiet as the uneasy feeling washed over us. To me, it did not feel like we were being watched anymore, more like we were being looked for. We stared intently out the window looking for signs of anything. When I thought I started hearing footsteps, having a wall between us and the steps muffled them, so I couldn't be sure what I was hearing. I asked Dee about them, and he said he heard them as well. However, I'm pretty sure he was just saying it for the video. We went quiet again, listening. Then I heard the footsteps get slightly louder. One of the cats started rubbing up against us, which distracted us and caused us to turn around and start petting him, because who wouldn't pet a cat? As for petting him, the outdoor motion light flickered on again. I felt goosebumps crawl up my arms to my face as we slowly turned around. We looked out the window and saw nothing. Dee told me again that we should get inside, and I agreed. We carried the cat back down to its bed, and we got ready to make the 50-yard sprint to his house. He opened the door, and I shut it. And then we were in the cold, dark woods, running as hard as we could from whatever turned on that light. After what felt like forever sprinting, we finally got to Dee's front door and we ran inside. We slammed his sliding glass door and didn't sleep until we saw the sun rising the next morning. Though these encounters were terrifying at the time, a lot of it can be easily explained by me just freaking myself out. There was nothing out there during the trash can story in Dee's house. We found raccoon prints the next morning outside the cat shed. None of these things ever stopped me from loving the woods, and within a week I was certain that I was just making things up. I continued loving the woods we lived in for the next year that we lived there, but eventually my family ended up moving out. My dad got a job offer in Minnesota, and it would improve our financial situation. And not to force my dad to a 2-hour commute every day, Minnesota, however, proved to be the worst place that I've ever lived, at least for the first year or two. After living in such a small town and adapting to my friend in Albert so much, I found it very hard to make friends in Minnesota. I was constantly thinking about my friends and the girlfriend I had left in Albert, and refused to work to make friends, and the people at my new school didn't particularly seem to like me. I would still talk to my friends in Albert, but almost every night we'd play video games and stuff with them, which was almost the only thing that seemed to make any sort of happiness in my life. With my mental health in the garbage and my lack of friends, my parents agreed to let me go out to Albert during the summer to visit my friends. After the first visit, my mental health was way better. I started opening up to other people at the new school as well, so my parents agreed to make an Albert trip annually as long as I planned them. Yeah, I have the coolest parents ever, of all time. So, every year since then, I've been visiting my friends in Albert. The most recent visit is the reason why I'm sharing this. Every year I'd hang out with my friends, who I'll call K and T and D, same D from before. Because of stupid teenage drama, they would almost never hang out together. One of my favorite things to do with them was ironically going squatching. Squatching is looking for Bigfoot, typically making their calls and using other communication methods in hopes of finding one. This was simply an excuse to go yell into the woods at night for me. This most recent trip, I finally had managed K and T and D to all hang out together. We had planned on making a short film that was based on these videos that T and I used to make. We ended up trying to film it, but ended up with like one scene before we decided just to play video games instead. Well, one day after dinner, the group came up with the idea to make Squatching video. TK and I filmed one last year, so we figured we'd just do another one this year and try to make it an annual thing. We took Kay's little brother out with us to film, and we started recording our video. The sun was still up, so it had no intention of being any sort of scary, just a funny, ironic video. We wandered around for an hour or so, making shitty Australian accents, shouting for Bigfoot. Then Kay had an idea that we split up and look for Squatch, so we did. We each went on our own way into the woods, with a cameraman following me, each making the occasional Squatch call and tree knock. We had some walkie-talkies with us, so we were able to tell each other when we were making a call. After some time, D and T and I found each other and decided to group up and meet with Kay in the clearing. We started walking, and Kay came over the radio saying that he was about to make a call. We waited. In the forest came the most terrifying noise I had ever heard anybody make. The best way that I could describe it was like a dying elephant that had a smoking problem. Then he came over the radio. "Was that you guys?" he asked. We assumed that he was joking around for the video, so we joked back, "No, mate. We've pissed off a Squatch. We need to get the fuck out of here. Meet us back at your house." And we ran out of the forest quickly. When we met up with him, he apparently had cut himself on some barbed wire. And that, plus the terrifying scream we heard him make earlier, seemed to put us off, so we decided to stop for the time being. We went inside and played Halo for hours, messing with each other and doing other stupid shit, not mentioning what had happened while squatching the rest of the night. When the night had more than passed, and it was around midnight, we decided to go back outside and continue squatching, this time without a camera, and with a bunch of flashlights. We decided to go pretty deep into the forest before not making any calls, so as not to wake up Kay's family in the neighborhood. Eventually, we got to the point that we had split up from earlier, and decided what to do. After talking about it some, we decided to see where Kay had run off to. Then I made the first Squatch call of the night. After the call, the woods went completely silent. In my previous story, I talked about the abyss watching me. This was almost the same, except it felt as if the forest was listening to us. We laughed about it and poked fun at each other, trying to creep one another out, and started walking. Kay led us pretty deep into the woods and eventually stopped in a small opening, showing us that this is where he had radioed us from before hearing the call. The thing is, Kay didn't refer to the call as his. He referred to as one of ours. This didn't register at the moment, but thinking back, it definitely gives me the creeps. After a bit more joking, Kay decided to take us to the boundary of his property where he'd cut himself. We walked in a straight line toward the fence, and I think Kay figured we'd follow the fence to where he had cut himself. As we walked deeper into the forest, though, our joke started to die down. The silence, darkness, and this feeling started to get to us. We were starting to suspect that we were being watched. We arrived to the fence and started walking along when Kay stopped, confused. I looked at where his flashlight was pointing, and there was the fence. However, the fence was almost dented, if that makes any sense. It looked like something had come through and simply stepped on the fence with enough weight that the fence couldn't bring itself to its natural position. I shined my flashlight into the other property and asked Kay about it. I can't remember exactly what he said, but I think I remember him saying it was a large piece of property owned by the Native American land that had once been sacred or something like that. that was probably wrong, so take that info with a grain of salt. Our group looked at each other. "Let's go over there," I remember myself saying. "Worst case scenario, we'd find whoever's property it is, and we can tell him about the broken gate." This was obviously not the worst case scenario, especially out in the country like this, but we continued anyway. After going through some more pretty heavy woods, we found a clearing, and then we felt something awful. The hair on back of all of our necks stood up at once, and we started hearing slight twig snaps in every direction. This was a massive change from the previous quiet forest that we had just been walking through. The hair on the back of all of our necks stood up at once, and we started to hear slight twig snaps in every direction. This was a massive change from the previous quiet forest that we had just been walking through. We quickly shined the lights in every which way, looking for anything that could have caused this fear, when Dee's light stopped on something. "Guys, do you see that?" We all shined our lights on the same spot he was looking at. I couldn't see anything at first, and I was just about to say nope when I made out what looked like the reflection of eyes. We each confirmed one by one, each of us starting to make out the eyes. Then we did something stupid. We started walking toward it. Maybe this was because there were 4 of us and 1 pair of eyes, or maybe it was how luring they looked, but every step we took, the more they faded out, until we couldn't see them anymore. Then we felt the hairs on the back of our necks stand up even more, as if pointing in the direction of something that did not approve of us being there. We stood back to back, making a square, as we felt the presence circling us. "Guys, we have to get out of there," one of the group said. We all nodded and waited. Then, when nighttime fell, we sprinted. We all ran as fast as we could, jumping over the fallen fence through the forest, and until eventually I saw the house. I heard the others run by me, hidden by the forest, when suddenly I stopped. "Ryan, help!" My heart sank. I had just heard the other 3 run past me, yet this was a perfect voice of Kay calling for help. I shoved the thought that this could be Kay out of my head after all. I had just heard all 3 of my friends run by me. I began sprinting again, hoping to catch up to Kay. After sprinting for a minute or 2, I caught up with them, being too slow down. Almost at the house, I caught up with Kay and was about to talk to him when we both flinched backward, almost falling. Just to the right of us, there was a crashing thud of something that had just hit the ground. We quickly recovered and sprinted toward the door, urging the others on. When we finally got back to Kay's house, we slammed the door behind us and had to just rest, panting. When we all seemed to calm down, Kay asked what the hell happened out there. We all went around and shared what we saw. Dee said he saw the reflection of eyes, and more than what was just in the clearing. Kay said he saw the reflection of eyes in the clearing and heard 2 thuds that freaked us out. T said he might have seen eyes in the clearing and some yellow-red ones as we were closing the door. I stated what I had saw, but decided to leave out the voice. I wasn't, and I'm still not sure, I heard what I heard. We sat down and almost immediately started searching for cryptids and looking for other stories like ours. Within half an hour, our preliminary theories were Goatman, Jersey Devil, Wendigo. Almost in response to our theories, we heard 2 ever-so-quiet footsteps on the roof. Eventually, we got to sleep, but after that, we never spoke a word of it again. Maybe a year or so later, I was trying to creep myself out when I found stories about Wendigo. These stories sounded familiar to my experience, but didn't seem quite right. What led me into the rabbit hole, and eventually I learned about Skinwalkers. Since then, I've loved hearing stories about them. I'm fascinated with what they are and how they hunt. stopped believing recently, however, after rethinking my tale for like the 100th time. I'm 90% sure that what we heard and saw was just a horse that we had gotten onto the bad side of, which is oddly common, I guess. What really spooks me, however, is when I let out the 10% and think that it might have been something paranormal. Either way, I don't understand how Kay lives on that property. I'll be visiting them this summer, so I'll see him again, but hopefully we won't encounter whatever we had the last time we were out there.
And there you have it, folks. Today's bonus. I do hope you all enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is your support that keeps this channel growing and going, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we all deserve, and that is because of all of you, and I do appreciate it. Thank you. Please, everyone, stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real. They are out there and dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.